you know, this bears out the indictment. But on a personal level, Baldwin said, I can't go that route. So it's a tough situation. And it was the same problem he had with his father earlier. So again, these are the things that I hope that you'll be able to wrestle with in an essay. Let's see. I looked back at the young faces around the table and looked at Elijah, 73, who was saying no people in history had ever been respected who had not owned their land. And I think that is true. You have to be a homeowner, you have to be a landowner, you have to be a small business person, you have to be an entrepreneur in the United States in order to gain a modicum of power and respect. It's a capitalist country, fortunately or unfortunately. That's just the way it is. That has nothing to do necessarily with race. All races, Koreans, Afro-Americans, Jewish people, Arabs, Anglo-Saxons, Poles, Irish, all have to toe the same thing. Nobody has a free ride on this regard. Capitalism is a struggle. People prefer capitalism in some ways because they prefer to manage their own destiny. They don't want to be told by governments what they should do. And we've seen totalitarian governments. We know what totalitarian governments do. And we know that totalitarian governments are not pleasant to live under either. Maybe you get a paycheck every week that allows you to survive, but that's about all you get. So most people say, I'd rather take my risk out there in the jungle than have a totalitarian government tell me what I should be doing. So that's a philosophical discussion beyond our scope. But given that this is the world we live in, we might as well, my view is we might as well get used to it and make the best of it, which we're not going to change in our lifetime. Unless you're Che Guevara, as I said. You go see the Motorcycle Diaries, if you like. It's out there now about his early life. He's someone who thought he could change it, but he ended up in Bolivia very badly shut up. Say, well, that's the injustice of the capitalist world. Oh, yeah, it is. But that's the world we're going to live in. And unless you want to end up in Bolivia badly shot up, then unfortunately we're going to all be Uncle Toms. White, black, or any other color in between. And to my mind, that's not a negative. I think that, to my mind, as soon as I can tell my children, be an Uncle Tom, this is the way the world is, get on with this because it's not going to change in your lifetime, and probably if it did, it'd be worse. So, you know, as good and decent as your impulses for justice and change are, the world is going to continue the way it is. So, since you have a life to lead, all you can do is lead it the best that you can within that system. That's what I would tell anyways if I was a preacher, but I'm not a preacher, so I'll just carry on. Elijah's intensity, 74, and I think James Baldwin and I probably agree on that point. Bitter isolation, disaffection of the young men, and the despair of the streets outside it caused me to glimpse dimly what may now seem to be a fantasy, although in an age so fanatical I would hesitate to say precisely what a fantasy is. Let us say the Muslims were to achieve possession of 6 or 7 states they claim owed to the blacks by the United States as back payment for slave labor. And you know, a lot of people are asking for reparations now. So you see that that's a black Muslim position even back in the 60s that people are still speaking about. And but you see, even James Baldwin knows it's a fantasy, that no one's going to give anyone 6 or 7 states. They're not going to give it to the Hispanic Americans, and they're not going to give it to any other American. You're just going to have to, they're not going to give it to the Native Americans. You're just going to have to deal with what we have here. And a lot of people, you know, it's a funny thing, went back to Africa in the wake of many of these situations. And I remember some stories that I heard about all the Black Panther and other groups who were preaching this sort of thing. Stokely Carmichael, who married Miriam Makeba, the famous South African singer. And many of them went to Ghana, which was one of the first modern new African states back in the middle part of the last century. And there were stories about how they all ran and threw their American passports into the ocean to demonstrate their allegiance to the new state of Ghana, and like 6 weeks later, they were all out there crawling on the sand looking to find their passports. I mean, you can have all the idealism that you want, but when you're faced with a new country with its problems, sometimes the old country that you came from doesn't look half bad. And people like Eldridge Cleaver, who was a very famous black Panther leader, just did 180 degrees about face after living 10 or 15 years as an exile in different countries in North